Alright, I'm going to make a little video, another one, on silking. I got this kit, haven't started it yet. Super Sportster 40, that's where I'm going to be building it. But I can join videos together. I'm no Steven Spielberg or anything like that. But I can tie them together to where I can make a step-by-step on how to silk a wing. Or a fuselage, because I'll be silking this one. But, onward. Okay, kind of starting this. I got my pieces. I always like to start the bottom of the wing first. Due to the fact that sometimes when you start putting the dope on this, not very often, but it can drip through and it'll leave a spot to where I'd rather have that happen on the bottom than the top, if it does happen. But I got just one piece of silk cut, which I'll set over here. Wing is built, all sanded, pretty much ready to go. I like to have a box here just to get it up off of things. Now what? I'm going to move my camera a little bit here. Alright, so I got my SIG butyrate dope. You can get that right from SIG. And I got thinner and all the stuff that goes along with it. I got my little paintbrush. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go along the trailing edge, all these edges here, all this, coat that real good, top and bottom, leading edge, do about 3 inches in the middle here because I'll overlap the silk. And I'm going to go all the way around it, and I'm not going to record the whole thing because it'd be a waste of time. And I just do this and I let it dry, so basically the silk will have kind of an area that's got the dope on it to where you can secure it down and stretch it when you start laying it. Just go ahead and, I guess I do just a little in the middle here. Just like that, and then I'll go along the back edge here. Another nice thing about doing this, especially on the leading edge like this here, where you may get a little fuel that soaks through at some point, it'll seal it. And then go along like this edge. I'll try not to get any on the ribs. I just want it on the edge here, so when I go start putting the silk down, it's got some place to adhere to. And when I put the silk down, I get it damp. And you'll see what I mean by that when we get to that point. But like I said, I'm not gonna record doing all this. You just, like I said, do all the way around, top and bottom. You don't have to do all the inner and all the ribs. I wouldn't do any of those. You want the silk to be able to slide over that when it's wet, damp, and it's drying. That way there you won't get bunching up on the ribs. So don't put any dope on the ribs, or just about 3 inches in the middle here, and that'll be top and bottom, and the leading edges, top and bottom. And then we'll go on from there. Okay, video 3. As I stated earlier, I went across all the leading edges, trailing edges everywhere. I do like to give if you got landing gear blocks in your wings, I give them a really good coat, because I am going to cut the silk down the center so the landing gear rod holds it down in there, but I don't want it to bubble up on that. And again, don't give any of this a coat, none of the wing ribs, none of that. You want it, when you get the silk damp, you want it to be able to stretch and not get hung up and cause little ripples and pockets. Normally what I do is I take my silk and I actually hang it from a piece of wood, which I don't have out here right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that on there. A lot of people are going to say, well, silk don't get along, they don't, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're going to see it with your own eyes right here. This is the way I was taught to do it. It's also the way I've been told to do it by some older modelers. And I do like to have my stuff there. The brush I like is that. It's cute. It used to be purple. And again, like I said, I've already went around all the edges, leading edges, trailing edges, all that with my dope, which is butyrate dope. And like I said, usually I hang this from a board over here or something like that, and I'll get it damp and let it relax. Because you'll see as I get it damp, all these wrinkles are going to come out. On the water, I got well water at my house, so I use bottled water because, well, my well water has a lot of minerals in it. I would use bottled water if I lived in town and had city water because it's got all the crap in it it's got in it. But you want to use a good clean water. This is a little mister my wife used to use on her tanning bed, but I ensconced with it, and I've had it for a few years, and she hasn't asked where it went. And I'm not going to tell her. So, get the silk damp. And I do like to set the wing on like a cardboard box like I got this. Now you're trying to get the silk damp. Not soaking wet, just damp. I'm actually going to turn my heat down a little bit in here right now so it doesn't kick in. And then just let that sit for a little bit. And you can see them wrinkles are starting to come out already, but if you hang it, it seems to do a little better. You definitely don't want to let it get wet enough to where the balsa would start swelling up. I've never done that, but I know you could. I don't want to leave that there. Could happen. But you can kind of see that's kind of starting to be able to get it tight now. Yeah. Get that wrinkle out of there. And I do like to actually leave a little more down that way. It is silk, so it dries very fast. I was going to shave for this video, but I figured the guys I'm talking to don't care. The son of a bitch. Just want to get the majority of the wrinkles out of it. Something like that right there. Still got one wrinkle. Okay, now I'm going to give it another little dousing of water. Like I said, you want to keep it damp. You can see all the wrinkles are gone now. All that. Try to remember not to take your paintbrush over the silk when you're coming over, because it will drip off your brush, and that's why my floor is what it is. And I like to do this leading edge first, right back here, or the center edge here. If you remember, I did 3 inches about here, so I want to do the same right now. And I probably when I did the leading edges and the trailing edges and all the way around with just the first coat of dope, I probably let it sit for 2 hours or so. I mean, it looks like it's dry way before that. Stuff actually seems like it dries pretty quick. Now I am going to be cutting around that. So I got all kinds of trash and shit up on there, and I use that for shit like that, right there. See, I can go right around that. And again, damp, not wet. You don't want to get it soaking. You can see all the wrinkles are about gone. And I'll move that down a little bit to make sure I'm still in the video here. Yeah, that's good enough. But you can see I can start pulling that tight now. See, with monocoat, this all happens when you put iron to it. And I just do it right along the edge here. I usually do the back edge first, but I don't have that one facing me, because I'm going to take the top and roll it across the bottom. And that's another reason I do the bottom first. Over there I don't have no seam flapping in the wind. And then, again, damp, not soap, but damp. I'm going to kind of pull this out to where, see I got a bubble or two right there. I don't know if they show up on camera, but if you pull in the right spot, they will disappear. Just like that. And now I did that leading edge, and one thing I like to do is take my finger and just, a hand, and just go along where I just dope that. And now I can kind of start getting the, you can kind of see them, I'm sure. But you see how that's all coming out of there? And just that little bit of water will make it stick enough to where you can kind of see where that's getting nice and tight now. I'm going to dampen it up again, because I don't want it drying all the way, because then it starts shrinking back up. Well, then it pulls everything loose on you. But the tighter you can get it, the better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give this here a healthy coat. I will do along the leading edge here as well. But the reason I'm doing this is because I can pull this. And I do like to take my finger, and I really think that helps. You can see how it's not sticking to the wing ribs and all that shit. And that's because you did not put any dope on it when you perimeter did it. You see how nice and tight and no wrinkles in it. That's one of the biggest things the water does, is it helps get rid of the wrinkles, and it relaxes the silk so it'll stretch a little bit. And if you don't do that, you'll have a lot of fun trying to get it tight enough. And let that dry just a little bit. And I like to start from the bottom of the wing for lots of reasons, and I've named them off. Now I'm going to just kind of, that just takes the excess off. And you can't probably see it, but there is a little wrinkle right there, but see, I can pull it right out. Yeah, pull all that right out of there. And the tighter you get it now, the better. That dope's already, when I drag that across like that, it's already holding it. You can kind of see how nice and tight that is. Alright, I gotta move my camera case here. Okay. It's still in the frame? Yeah, pretty good. Now for this. I should have shaved, right, fellas? Yeah, I don't know if you can see me or not. Kind of like the lone silker here. Well, you can see how nice and tight that pulls. This I like to wrap around a little bit. And again, I do like to take my finger and just kind of smooth that out and give it a second to dry. I have pinned that too before on a bigger airplane and a smaller one. So you can come over here and load that up. You hear it stretching there. And then take your finger, make sure you get it nice and tight. And I'm not going to lie, these edges are, it's not like monocoat. It's a little different. But you got to get that so it's not wrinkled up like that, but tight. Which we're getting there. Just want it tighter. Always tighter. And what I'm trying to do now is get a little bit under on the underside, so when I pull this around I can kind of, you know, flip it up. I do like to keep that fairly short there too for the weight, so when I do flip it up underneath like that, it'll stay. And don't forget, keep getting it damp. Pull that right up like that. I get this crap all over my hands, so it's just the way it is. I want to make sure that's good and tight. I'm going to cut the video off here because I don't want it to end up being too long. I just want to get this wing tip done so you can kind of see how that's done. And I will let this dry for quite a while and let it dry. You can kind of see how that silk is staying tucked around that. Well, there, when this does dry and start shrinking up, it doesn't pull itself free. But you can remember how wrinkly it was when I first put it on here and how it is now. That's pretty, I mean, it's not, I mean, that's pretty tight. I could probably bounce something off it. And the water is kind of what does that, because it loosens up the silk to where you can stretch it a little bit. And now what I'm going to do, of course, is I'm going to angle cut this and cut this off flush. I'm going to dope this to the trailing edge. I'm going to cut this along just underneath the leading edge here. That'll cut off and dope it to the inside. And once I get all that done, I'll start another video showing how I finish this up and explaining it. And then we'll go on to the other side. Okay, it's probably been about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, half hour. Since I finished the last video. But now you can kind of, I got the new piece cut for the other side. I like to do the whole bottom and the top. I don't like to start doping any of this until I got the entire thing covered. I know how tight this stuff can get, and I do believe it could warp a wing. Maybe not a wing that's this beefy on a Sportster like this, but a lot of wings. I kind of want to show you here what that looks like with the water I used on it. You can kind of see how nice and tight that is. Oh, I got one little wrinkle, but that'll come out. But you can see how tight that is. And that's what the water does. I have a wing over here I scratch built a few years back. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's been laying around my shop for, I don't know, 5 years. But you can see, and that's just been sitting against my wall. This is actually one I was going to make a video on, and I never did make a video on it. But a wing like this here, that's not sheeted and stuff, if you tried to like do the bottom and dope it, I think it would twist your wing. So I always like to get top and bottom covered, and then do the entire bottom, one coat, let it dry, do the top, one coat, flip it over, 2 coats on the bottom, let that dry, flip it over, 2 coats on the top. Kind of try to keep it as even as I can. I was originally putting only 3 coats on here, but I'm using 4 now, and I'll show you why when we get to that point. But I'll go ahead and cut this off now, and I'm going to go ahead and silk the rest of the wing. You can see where I wrap that around here. It's nice, and you know, I'll cut my hinges in here when I get to that point. But and I'll trim these little pieces off here. I like to let the dope dry all the way, because then you just take a new X-Acto blade, and you can actually just go right along it once that dope is dry. And just saw it, basically, right off. and you get a nice clean edge. And I'll do that with all this. I usually do that right at the end though. Like I said, I'll go ahead and dope or silk the rest of the wing, and then come back and start doping everything, because there are some unexpected things that happen during that process. And again, just when you've got your wing already, you've sanded it, it's nice, it's smooth, everything's flush and even and, you know, perfect. That's what this is all about. No dope on your wing ribs. No dope. Just about an inch up front and in the back here, and about 3 inches in the middle. You want this silk to be able to slide and stretch and do what it's got to do. You remember how wrinkly it was when I first laid it on here, and then I started getting it damp and you could see the wrinkles coming out? Well, this is what you should end up with. The tighter it is here, which is really tight. I don't know, can I find something? Well, let's do this. You can see that bounces. And that's just straight silk, no dope on it. You want the silk to be able to stretch and move across the surface as it dries. So that's why the reason you don't put no dope on your wing ribs, and you just do the edges and about 3 inches in the middle so it can move as it dries. And this is what you'll end up with. Anyway, I'll finish silking the wing, and then we'll come back and start putting dope on it. Alright, I just kind of want to show you something here again real quick. I just got done putting down this silk. You can see it's nice and tight. You really want to watch along the edges because you want to make sure that looks pretty good. But you can kind of see this wingtip, how I folded it around. Now I'm going to cut that right along here. And then when I put the top on, I'll fold that around to the bottom. But this way here, if you fold it around a little bit, like that, when it dries, it won't pull and starts tightening up. It won't pull itself off. Because you can see that's pretty tight. That's the way you want it. Another thing I probably should have brought up a little earlier, silk has a grain to it, like carpet. If you know anything about carpet, you know, when you seam carpet, you gotta make sure the nap is going the right way. Same when you're doing a wing. You can do the top different than the bottom, but the bottom or the top, you want to run the silk the same direction. As you can see, this one here, the grains are going kind of this way, and this one here is this way. I do both ways. There's no, once you dope it, you'll see what I mean when I get to that point. But it does kind of, when you paint it, because you're going to end up painting this eventually, that it can show in that. So you don't want one grain going this way and one going that way. Otherwise it looks kind of funny. Especially in the sunlight. But this is all down. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll go along and trim all this off. And I'll cut this right along here. And then go down and cut that. And I'll actually, maybe I can show you. I don't want to flip this over because it's not dry, but ooh, I got a big bubble in that. But I think that, oh yeah, there we go. Okay. You can kind of see how I did this side. You know, I folded it around. Well, when I put the silk around and it's tight here, you're not going to see any of this. That's just there to make sure that it doesn't unwrap itself. And I won't give that like a second or third coat of dope. When I get that dries, I'm going to silk the top part of the wing, and then I'm going to start doping the entire thing. And like I said, having a box or something to get it up off your bench is kind of nice, because you kind of hold it here and you can kind of do what you got to do here and there. And you want your silk pretty tight like that when you get it to this point. You can see that's, now that that's dry, if I put this on here, you can see that bounces. And that's no dope on it yet. That's just dry silk. And that's actually a fairly good size. That's a piece off a muffler. But that's kind of what you're after. I hope you could see that, yeah. But I'll let this dry, and then I'll trim it all up, and I'll do the trailing edge and trim this all up, and I'll dope. You know, when I cut this, there's going to be a little bit, so I'll get the dope back out and, you know, tack it down like I did that side. And once I get the entire wing covered, top and bottom, then we start doping the whole thing. And like I said, a good little paintbrush like this. This dope in the thinner is pretty aggressive. I've used paintbrushes that weren't crimped like this, just glued. Well, the solvent will delete the glue and all the bristles come out. And for usually doping the wing part, I got a nice soft brush here. I got to clean it. I've been using it for years. But that's what I use to kind of put the dope around there on to cover it. But you can kind of see how that's coming along. Now that'll dry, and it's already tightening up. I'm not going to get it wet anymore. I got it all tacked down. It's dry. It's not coming loose. So So that'll keep getting tighter. And again, that's why when you dope the frame before you put any silk on, you do about 3 inches in the middle, about 1.5 inches here, do the trailing edge, this, nothing on the wing ribs. If you do that, it's going to bunch up as it dries, and you'll be very disappointed. And as far as water on the silk, I have tried putting silk on dry, and if you can pull out them 400 million little wrinkles that end up in it, you're a better silker than I am. The dope will go right through the water, as you can see with your own eyes that this is damp. You can see that side's probably lighter. This is darker because it is still wet. It does adhere itself even though it's damp. And that silk, when you get it damp, not soaking wet, it does loosen it up to where you can stretch it a little more. And then when it dries, it shrinks back up and it makes it tighter. You want it tight when you start doping. If it's loose when you start doping, it's not going to tighten up. It's basically going to go, the finished product, it's basically going to be like this here, that tight, but all the pores in the silk are going to be filled with the dope. If you start out with loose and wrinkly silk, well, that's what you're going to end up with. So it's really important that, you do just 3 inches here, inch here, 1.5 inches, trailing edge, around this side, and I do the back side. And that way there, once you get, it should be tight like that. And believe it or not, as I get this doping this, I can't remember, I think it's the first and second coat, it'll actually wrinkle up really bad and look bad, like, oh, I got to tear this shit off and start over. That's not the case. It's just part of the process. By the third coat, it'll start tightening up. Usually I only put 3 coats on, but I like it, I've been doing this a while now. I like 4 coats of dope, and that stuff is kind of expensive. Those 3 coats is cheaper than 4. But the 4th coat really fills in all the grains in the silk to where when you paint it, it's like a mirror. So, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I just wanted to point out, wrapping that around like that. And then when you trim it, then just once it's all dry, take your brush and dope and flip the wing over and dope that little bit where you cut off down so it's not sticking up or in the way. And that's that. We'll be back. Okay, as you can see, I got it all covered. Pretty tight. Only place there's any dope is on the leading edges. This is all down. I don't cut the servo area out until dead last, because the more dope you get on this, the stiffer it gets, and the nicer it'll cut, actually. Kind of like on this edge here, I actually wrap that around the bottom. I know air's going to hit it, but it's doped down good enough to where there's really not an edge there. You just got to cut a nice even line. And I'm going to do the top of this wing first. I got thinking about it. I know I said I was going to do the bottom first, but with the spacing and everything in these wing ribs, I decided to go ahead and do the top first. And again, you're using sig butyrate dope. There's nitrate. I prefer butyrate. The first coat you put on here, you're not trying to saturate it, well, you're just trying to get a real quick coat on to kind of seal the silk up. And I use a brush about like that size, and I'll come over here and just start putting it down. And it does dry kind of fast, so I got the heat down in my room just to keep it from tacking up too fast where I get a bunch of brush strokes in it. And you will see brush strokes, but don't worry about it. They will disappear as it dries. Another thing I like to do is I try to go, when I come up here, I'll go this way just to get that, but then I'll come back over here, and I like to try to go the same way. You see how I'm going all the way up? Now you can see how that is not covering, and that's what I'm talking about. You just want to hit it real quick. Don't try to, make a finished product out of this. You are going to be giving it 2 to 3 more coats, and you're just trying to hit that as quick as you can. This dope's expensive. You don't want to sit there and mess around. And you don't want to do that. That will probably not show up because I'm going to be painting over it right now, or doping over it. But you can kind of see how I'm doing this. And like I said, you want to hit them in between the ribs just real quick. You're not trying to fill it in. You're just trying to seal up most of the pores in the silk. Second coat is where you'll start actually sealing it all up. And that's when because right now a lot of this is just going right through the silk and it's just a waste. Don't worry about pushing down on the silk and stuff like that. But there's that half. And that's what it looked like. Now, like I think somebody might be here. Nope. Now, the silk looks real nice and tight right now and everything, and that's awesome. But that's going to change. I don't know if you can even see the rest of this. Yeah, you can. Actually, I'll just turn it this way. Another thing, when you're putting your dope on here like this, normally I do try to put this kind of in the center here so I'm not going over the wing with a loaded paintbrush. This stuff really stinks. Don't do this in your house unless you have a really understanding wife. I'm lucky enough to have a shop to where I don't have to do it in the house. I do have a vent fan in here I do not have on because I like the smell of this shit. Boy, I sniff it sometimes. I'm just kidding. I don't do that. So I'll recommend it using it. Like I said, over in between the ribs here, you really just want to hit that real quick and fast and furious. You're just trying to get a little on that silk because it is a porous thing and it will go right through it. But you get this coat on, that's going to fill a majority of the holes. And then when you come across with your second coat, it'll paint on a lot nicer. I mean, you'll go through half as much dope. You don't have to be careful. The silks are all tacked down. It's not coming loose. You're not going to make it stretch out or anything goofy like that. Alright, so that's that. And buy plenty of thinner. You're using a big brush like this, you're gonna go through it. Now I'm gonna let that dry. Now you can sand some of this. Like I got a wrinkle right here, which will probably shrink up and come out when the dope starts tightening up the silk. What's going to happen now, as you can see, it looks nice and tight. It should on your camera, on the camera anyway. This coat, and then usually there's a bristle from my brush. It'll start getting loose and wavy. It'll look like you fucked everything up, and you're going to tear it off and start over. Don't give up. When it gets wrinkly like that, the next coat will tighten it right back up, and it'll actually get just like this. I'll record that too, but I'll show you that when it dries and how wrinkly and wavy it gets, and it kind of looks like shit. Like, you know, kind of like. Damn it! There's another bristle down here. Maybe it's time for a new brush. There's another one. Alright, it's time for a new brush. That one, I'm not even going to clean that one. That's going in the trash right now. I do have other brushes. But like I said, you're just trying to get a quick coat on this. And you want to make sure after you put the silk on and all the edges are dry before you start doping the center, because this is when it's going to start changing shape. This is also when you're gluing it down to the center of the ribs. So it's going to be tacked down everywhere now. And that's why it gets wrinkly, I believe. But you'll see what I'm talking about. When this dries, I'll come back and I'll show you. Usually on the second coat is when it's the worst. But when that happens, don't get frustrated. Just give it another coat, let it dry. I usually like to let this first coat dry probably an hour after it looks and is dry, because it does keep evaporating and tightening up. So I don't know if I'll give this a second coat yet tonight or do it tomorrow morning. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let that dry, and then when it's done, we'll come back. Alright, I don't know if you can see this, but I already started giving it a second coat, got ahead of myself. You can see a couple little wrinkles here. You can see the wrinkles down through here. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm hoping you can. But I'm going to give it a second coat now, and we'll make another video. Usually on a second coat, things are a little more visible. So, here we go. Okay, we're still on the, this is only the first coat. That's got the second coat on it. Now, on the first coat, you had to go kind of fast. Otherwise, you know, it's silk, it's porous. But now you got the first coat on, you'll find that each brush load will go a little further. Not a whole lot more on the second coat because it's still pretty porous, but you're actually starting to feel the weave and the silk on this coat. So I'm going to go ahead and let you watch me put on the second coat on this other half of the wing. And then when I do the third coat, you can see the difference. And on the fourth coat, you'll really see the difference. Like I said, you're not going to hurt the silk at this point unless you take something sharp to it. Stuff is pretty durable. And really make sure you get the leading and trailing edges real good. But you'll see now, another thing that's kind of handy when you get to this point, because it is white on white, move it in the light because you'll notice that you miss some fairly large areas from time to time. Especially when the wing's the other way and this is pitched away from you. You gotta move it up and down and make sure you're getting a nice even coat on everything. And I do like to kind of keep the brush strokes all going the same way. It's a little easier to go this way on the front here. I'm just going along it and knock it down. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I know that was a problem on one of my other videos. But I do have a new camera. It's smarter than I am, an Alpha 6500. But like I said, when you're doing this, just make sure you're actually starting to feel the pores in the silk now. You want to really make sure I can see areas that I missed, so I'm going back over them. That may look a little rough on the camera, like it's real porous and textured and all that, but this stuff about 95% evaporates as it dries. This is what's going to tighten the silk up and really determine the finish that you have on your airplane when you paint it. And you can use automotive paints and things like that. Automotive paint is fuel proof. They don't make the ultra coat anymore. I think it's ultra coat. Luster coat. So luckily I got lots of it. I knew they were going to quit making it before they quit making it, so I bought everything I could get my hands on. But that's a second coat. That's the first coat. You can kind of see on this side here how it's wrinkly. It'll get worse. Usually on the second coat. Not every time, every model's a little different, but usually on the second coat it'll really wrinkle up and it'll look like it's going to be a mess. Don't pay any attention to that. Just let it dry. By the time you get the third coat on it and let that dry, it'll really tighten up. And like I said earlier, I usually only put 3 coats on it, but I noticed it was still a little porous, and if I put 4 coats on it, it's like a piece of glass once it dries. Well, we'll show you that. But we'll go ahead and let that dry, and then I'll give the bottom a second coat, and then when I come back and do the third coat, you'll see a difference in how far you can get every time you load the brush up. It won't absorb as much. So, alright, that's that. Okay. Happy New Year! Yay! Okay. Alright, this is 2 coats. I must be getting better at putting this on, because usually it wrinkles up a little bit. This stays nice and tight. And that's only 2 coats. But now I'll show you what I mean by, now it'll go on a lot, more like, I don't know, paint, I guess. Now the pores are pretty filled up on the silk. I'll go ahead and give this here a coat, one half of the wing here, so you can see. And the first time you try this, I wouldn't go out and get a $600 kit, and you know, I'd try to find like a sweet stick or sweet and low stick or something like that. Just, you know, $70 airplane kit, something like that. The first time you do it, 'cause it is a learning process. But you can see that it's tight. Like I said, usually when I do this, on the second coat it gets real wrinkly. Maybe it'll do it on the third coat this time. I doubt it. But if it does do that to you, the third coat will tighten it back up. Like I said, I think I'm just getting better at this to where... And I do like to keep the paint strokes going the one way there. Alright, now you'll be able to see that when I paint it, or put it on here, it's no longer sagging, or I'm not pushing it through the silk anymore. One brush will do one whole section, and then some. I am going to give this a fourth coat, just because it makes it like really, when you paint it, it makes it look just like glass if you paint it nicely. And again, I like to keep all that going this way. I like to make sure I get that back edge. Another thing I'll do is I'll run my finger along them edges once I'm done, because they're a sharp edge, and it will kind of pull up on there. I mean, when it dries, you just take an X-Acto knife or Stanley knife or whatever and cut it right off. But I'd rather get it while it's wet. But you can kind of see that there. But we'll let that dry. Again, silk doesn't go on exactly like monocoat. A lot of it's similar around the edges, stuff like that. The only difference is you're not pulling and heating and stretching. You are stretching, but you're just not heating it. And you don't have quite as much play as monocoat. But, and like I said, if you can kind of see how that looks like shit. 90% of this is going to evaporate. And again, don't do this in your house if you don't have an understanding wife. The stuff does stink. But I'll go ahead and let me see if there's a puddle on this one. I usually, yeah, there's a couple of them. I just run my hand along that edge, and that'll knock off a little extra there. But I am going to give this another coat, bottom coat. That'll be 3 coats. And then what I'll do is come back and I'll put on, when I get the 4th coat on, I'll come back and show you. But you can kind of see how that looks with 2 coats. Well, it's going to look even better with 3 coats. Actually, I'll come back when I get the 3rd coat on and kind of show you what it looks like at that point. But like I said, if you're going to try silk, you can get on eBay, and there's a couple guys that periodically list silk. They don't have it on there all the time. I follow it, so when they list it, I know they've got it listed. And if I want some, I can buy some. Automotive paint is fuel proof and is compatible with lacquer, that is, with the butyrate dope. Rust-Oleum is not compatible. You spray this with Rust-Oleum, it's gonna bubble up and do some weird shit. You can still find this paint. There's a lot of it out there. eBay, RC Groups, RC Universe. If it ain't unlisted, just put down that you're looking for some. I like this stuff. Hoping Monocoat will start making it again. Seeing that silk span went the way of the dodo bird. But again, if you're going to do this, like this kit, Super Sportster, it's been out of production for a long time. It's hard to find. It's kind of expensive compared to what it used to be because, well, it is out of production. And I built one back in the 80s, and I wanted to build another one now. I actually have the 60 size Sportster, the 120 size Sportster. I have a lot of airplanes, actually, too many. I'll kind of take a spin in my shop here when I'm all done with this. But if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. I will put a link to the SIG dope. The one thing I don't see on SIG's website no more is this. But you can go to an automotive store and get lacquer thinner, and that'll be just as good. And that's probably what I'm going to end up doing if SIG doesn't start selling that again. But I'm going to go ahead and paint the rest of this wing up, give it one more coat. That'll be 3, and I am going to give this wing 4 coats. So we'll be back. Okay, make sure this is on. This is the 3rd coat. You can see, it's like a drum. The tighter you get it on when you first put it on with water, that's kind of key. I am going to give this a 4th coat. You'll be able to see the difference. That's why I'm doing it. You got to remember, there's a couple reasons you're putting the dope on the silk. One is to tighten it up. The other is to fill every little hole in that silk, the millions of little holes. I have had it to where I put 3 coats on it, and if you got one little pinhole in this silk, for whatever reason, the paint exaggerates it. This looks like it'd be fine to paint, but after I give it a 4th coat, you'll understand why I'm starting to do that. It'll just be a lot, you'll be able to see it's a lot smoother, a lot glossier, but that is what you're after. And like I said, hit like if you enjoyed the video, if it helps you out at all. I'll probably make one when I do the fuselage, because I will be silking quite a bit of that. But like I said, if you're going to try to silk something, buy like a little stick or some kind of inexpensive kit. Don't go out and buy a $600 kit and start out silking it. Kind of, I don't know. Even like, let me look around here for a minute here. Hang on a second. I know I got something around here. Well, kind of like this wing, I guess. I'm showing this one before. But I built this from scratch just because I had crap laying around. It's all dirty, you can see that. It's sitting in my shop forever. But, start on something like that. That's just going to be a little high wing, no ailerons. I mean, you can put ailerons on it, I suppose. But it hasn't been painted. It's just got the 3 coats of dope on it. I guess it was set up for ailerons, or I was building it for ailerons. But, start out with something like that, something simple. Don't go out and buy a Dauntless or something, big money kit, and start out with silk, because, square wing, even this rounded stuff's kind of hard. Let me see if I got a different wing here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. I did this one last year. Okay, this is only 3 coats of dope, but this here's a SIG Hummer wing. Start out with a SIG Hummer. It's a $34 kit. Doesn't take a lot of silk, doesn't take a lot of dope. You can see that's nice and true, even on a little wing like that. SIG Hummer kit you can get off eBay, I think, for $44. I think you can get it from SIG for about the same money. But I'll go ahead and give this a 4th coat, and then we'll make the final video, and I'll put it all together and put it on YouTube. Talk to you later. Okay, so I've got 4 coats on this, and you can see they're not quite dry all the way, but it's pretty close. But you can see how nice and tight that is. I decided, this is the part of the plane most people are going to see. It's the top of the wing. The bottom here, I don't think I'm going to give that 4 coats. That's good enough to paint. Ain't quite as shiny, but to do this wing took about a quart. I've got a couple other airplanes I want to build this year. But you can kind of see how that turned out. And it's probably 3 days. That's building the wing and silking it. So it's not a long drawn out process. But like I was saying, if you want to learn how to do silk, go to a swap meet and buy some stick ARF or something like that. Strip the monocoat off it and silk that. Don't start out with a real expensive airplane. If you have any questions, just ask. But that's pretty much how you silk. I know there's going to be some people out there, oh, you can't put water on your silk, and then you watched me do it. I mean, that's pretty. This here's I don't know, something off a muffler. And the nice thing is, that's going to keep getting tighter. It's going to get tighter and tighter, and it's not going to stop. This will never get a wrinkle or a warp or anything like that in it. If you crash an airplane, the nice thing is it's like a bag when you carry it back because the silk is that strong. Usually everything stays pretty intact. It'll go right back in the box, but it'll be in a bag. It'll be a silk bag. But the water thing works. It makes it really easy to stretch the silk when you first start, and the tighter you get it when you perimeter tack it, the better it's going to be all the way around. You can hear that's like a drum. Any questions? Leave a comment. Hit like if you learned something from the video. Other than that, I can't really think of anything as far as doing this. Just take your time, and you can see how shiny that is with the fourth coat. Just take your time doing the edges and the corners here. The silk, the dope, you get it on there. It takes, a few seconds, a minute, 30 seconds, whatever, for it to start tacking up. And just keep, don't be afraid to get a little on your hands or wear some rubber gloves. And just kind of fold it around the edges. That's what I do. But I'll paint, this wing's going to go on one of my shelves over here, and I'm going to start building the fuselage now. And I'll paint pretty much the whole airplane once it's all built. But any questions, leave a comment. Thanks. Bye.